Good morning, everyone. I'm Kevin Allen, and I'm joined by my usual podcast partner, former NHL defenseman Tom Laidlaw. This is the Laidlaw and Allen Report. We come to you twice a week to talk all things hockey. And Tom, we start off with a sad note. Over the weekend, I read of the passing of former Colorado Avalanche general manager Pierre Lacroix, and he was also a former agent. I think that's part of his legacy. He moved from the agent role to GM, and I can't remember whether he was the first, but he was one of the first. I think Brian Burke might have beaten him.
Yeah. I think George McPhee was right in there too, right?
Yeah, George McPhee was as well, and
Mike Barnett.
Mike Barnett was another one. So Mike Gillis. Yeah. I'm trying to think who else would have been in that role. There's
I'm trying to think who else it was. Yeah.
Oh, Bill Zito just got hired in Florida.
Yeah, definitely.
Bill Zito went from agent to assistant GM, and if you make there actually is a lot of logic to that when you think about it, because most of those guys had a hockey background when they got into the agent business, and then once they get into the agent business, they have a better understanding of the finances of the game as well. So you're getting a guy that's seen sort of both sides, the financial and the hockey.
And as an agent, you do get to know the players and their personality, and kind of you get an idea of yourself of, okay, what kind of guys do I think are going to make good NHL players? Their personalities.
Yeah.
That's a big part of being a GM and picking the talent for your team. So, yep.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell a couple of stories about Pierre. I was pretty fond of Pierre, actually, and he was French Canadian, and he had that accent. A very professional man, always well dressed. But he would kid around with me a little bit, like as professional as he was. We got to, I had covered the league so long, he knew me, so he was comfortable talking to me, and we would always, have some fun when when I was interviewing him. But I always think about Pierre when I think about how sometimes people say to you things that you remember the rest of your life, even if it's not all that significant. And Pierre said to me one time, we were discussing Peter Forsberg's all-around play. And one of my contentions was that for a couple of those seasons, I thought Peter was the league's best all-around player. And by that, I mean, there were people who were better offensively than he was. But I thought when you combined, he played a strong physical game. I didn't think anybody protected the puck better than he did. He was very good along the boards. He was not a guy that liked to play on the perimeter. He went to the hard areas. And I had called Pierre to get his take on that. And we were talking about, like some of the guys through the years who had played that multifaceted game, and Gordie Howe came up because, and Gordie, of course, I wouldn't compare Peter to Gordie. Gordie was, a fighter as well. And he was a top scorer in the league. And so he was everything. He was like Peter Forsberg plus.
Yes.
But Pierre brought up something, and I've always remembered this little stat, and I often bring it up, and usually don't give Pierre credit for it as often as I should. But he said, do you know Gordie and Peter Forsberg were exactly the same size? He said, if you go and look Gordie up, I think it was 6'203", and that's what Peter Forsberg was.
Wow.
And the reason I like to bring that stat up is that people often said that Gordie seemed like a giant. I know that's exactly the quote that Glenn Hall used, that Gordie seemed 6'8". Well, at the time, the average player in the NHL was like 5'10", 165 pounds. So
I remember being around Ted Lindsay the first time, and he was a ferocious player. I mean, he was tiny. He was just
very tiny, very small. Yeah, very small.
Sure.
So Pierre Lacroix had that stat, and he gave it to me, and I have been using it. He probably gave that to me in, I would say, the mid 1990s. So for 25 years, I've said to people, Peter Forsberg was exactly the same size as Gordie Howe. Now, you don't think of that. Like Gordie, you think of Gordie being so big, and Peter Forsberg being, an average size player. So
yeah, he played hard though, but you're right. He was one of the first guys to, not the first guy, but one of the first guys to do that reverse hit too, where somebody went to hit him and he'd give it back to him. Yeah.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And they often credited Datsuk for that, and it wasn't. Forsberg did it before Datsuk did. And, the other thing about Pierre is, you got to give him some credit for bringing those great Colorado teams together, particularly the final piece, obviously, was Patrick Roy.
And Ray Bourque as well, right?
Ray Bourque brought him in, but the thing that glued it all together was Roy.
Totally,
and what was important about that is Pierre Lacroix, as I recall, represented Roy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And then he became general manager. And then when we had the famous incident on the blowout against the Detroit Red Wings, after it was over, and Roy went to the bench and turned to Ronald Corey, who was the team president, and he goes, "I'll never play for Montreal again."
Oh, I'll never forget that. I mean, because the owner sits right behind the bench there in Montreal, no glass there or anything. So I mean, imagine the feeling when you're like back then when you're coaching and playing, right, with the owner is sitting right there. You basically can hear everything that's going on. But I'll never forget when Patrick Roy went past. It was Mario Tremblay, right? Was coach.
Yes.
Yeah. Walked by him and went right to the owner. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, Ronald Corey, and said, "Yeah, I'll never play here again."
Oh, yeah,
so, and that was what that team needed. Obviously, they had some top players, and they were coming together. And then, of course, as you mentioned, they brought in Ray Bourque. But they had other guys that that people forgot about that Colorado team. Tanguay, Hayduk. I think.
Where Lacroix was really good too. A client of mine, Warren Reichel, was a good fourth line role player. Like that's where Pierre was really smart at making sure that he had all those pieces to the puzzle, right? So he put together a great hockey team. Yeah, who's the right shot Russian that they had too? Was a good player. I can't remember his name now.
Oh yeah, Kaminsky. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he was a very good Valery Kaminsky, a terrific player. To me, what I remember about Kaminsky is we always have this romance with the winger barreling down Guy Lafleur style down the wing and letting it go. And Kaminsky could do that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Kaminsky.
Now, what other? I don't know if anybody else in the league has ever done this. Pierre Lacroix had his own son on the team, Eric Lacroix, as well.
Yes. Sure. Role player, hard-nosed kid.
Played hard, But then I don't know. Is that a good idea or not? I mean, obviously they won. They knew what they were doing, but man, that's a tough spot sometimes. What the kid doesn't play well, and then he still gets played, whatever. I know Warren Reichel. Warren Reichel was a character. I mean, you interviewed Warren, right?
Yeah.
So Warren, he didn't have much of a filter, and I guess one point they weren't playing well, and they had one of those team meetings in the locker room. And he brought out, I guess, a bunch of the guys were having some complaints about the fact that Pierre's son was on the team and was getting preferential treatment, whether it was true or not, just the perception that was going on. And Warren felt it was going to be appropriate to bring that up in the meeting with Eric in the locker room. So apparently, I think it was, Patrick Roy pulled Warren aside after and go, "That's not a good idea."
Yeah, those teams, one of the hallmarks of those teams is that it didn't always go smoothly in Colorado. Bob Hartley was a guy who created a little bit of tension as well, and that was all sort of part of it. But and Roy was could be a clubhouse lawyer as well. A lot of people don't. I don't talk about this very often, but Patrick Roy was one of my all-time favorite players. I really enjoyed talking to him. Like he was so into all aspects of the game. Like prior to all the analysis that we do now, all the analytics, the advanced stats. Like he was a guy that poured over the stats all the time, and nothing went by him. Like if you said to him, "Did you see?" Or after the game, like he might say something like, "How about that fight at section 137, eh?" He goes, that guy really gave it to him. Like nothing. If a guy spilled his big bucket of popcorn all over three people in the front row, Patrick would mention it after the game.
That's right.
Very,
And
very
he had an attitude about him too. I remember there was a great film where the Kings were playing Montreal. I guess on their way to, I can't remember, it was on the way to the finals. I can't remember when it was, but anyways, Thomas Sandstrom had a great opportunity, and Patrick Roy stopped him. And then in slow motion, they showed how Thomas Sandstrom was looking back at Waugh, and Waugh's looking up at him, gives him the big wink, and like nodded his head, like kind of like, okay, yeah, nice try, I got you.
Yeah, one of the best trash talk lines ever was delivered by Patrick Waugh when Jeremy Roenick was chirping him, and of course Jeremy, had never won a cup, and they asked Patrick about it. He goes, "I told him I couldn't hear him because I had my 2 Stanley Cup rings in my ears."
That was good. His delivery was even good on that too. I remember that press conference, and he said that too with a French accent.
Yeah. He was always fun. I don't know if he still does, but years ago, Patrick Waugh was a big hockey card collector, and not like photos of himself. I'm sure he had those, but like 1930s cards. He was very into the history of the game. He was a goalie, for example, when he was chasing Terry Sawchuk's records. Went out and got the Terry Sawchuk biography and read it. Just because he wanted to know more about the guy that he was. So, going back to this team that Pierre Lacroix created, bringing in Patrick Waugh. Of course, they had Adam Foote, who was a very important player. When you start rating the important players on that team, you don't go too far down the list before you find Adam Foote.
Definitely. And Mike Keane was another key pickup too, right?
Yeah. So Pierre Lacroix built and then he, I thought, retired early. Maybe he knew that he wanted some retirement. Here's the other thing too, and I think it's really you and I, being our age, can really relate to this. Like, he died young. 72 didn't seem very young when I was in my 30s. Seemed old, but now that seems very young.
Closer, get to the end. What I remember about that team too? I was representing Warren Reichel at the time, and they were playing Florida in the finals, and it was down in Miami at the old rink they had there downtown, and it was the game where Uwe Krupp scored in overtime to win the cup, and I think the game started late too, and then they went into overtime, so they win the cup. And as you know, when you're a player, you can't touch the cup until you win it. That's just kind of the unwritten rule. So I had never touched the Stanley Cup, never been near it. And so I waited, and they were partying, and you got to let the players do their own thing. And I think I got into the locker room like at 3:00 in the morning, and got my picture taken with Warren and touched the Stanley Cup. And it was pretty cool. Just I wasn't even on the team, just to be there with a client that had won the Stanley Cup, and the whole scene. At 3 a.m. Obviously, there's a few adult beverages that were being had at that point, and that was a lot of fun. That was a great memory.
Yeah, I mean, for a sweep, it was actually a good series.
Yeah, it was.
Every game was close, as I recall. I mean, I hope I'm not wrong on that, but that was my memory of that. Van Beesbroek played pretty well in net, and then we had the Rat story.
Yeah. Who's that? Mellenby that killed the Rat? And then
the Rat player. Yeah. See, I thought that certain things like the league really got down on it, but that happened organically. Like, that wasn't a marketing plan. That wasn't 6 guys standing around saying, what can we do to do some in-game entertainment. That was Millenby killing a rat, somebody writing about it, fans on their own bringing plastic rats, and then after they did it one night and they really liked throwing the rats on, then suddenly the rink was full of them. Now, they probably went too far. Like, they were knee deep in rats after every score, and
you could see the ice. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and whatever momentum the Panthers had gotten from scoring that goal was lost. It was like the game started over every time they scored.
But the feeling in the building, you're right. There's the negatives too, but I know you know this too. But the feeling in the building was incredible, right? The fans were so into it and everything.
Yeah. Like, I really, really enjoyed that. It's kind of like the Octopus in Detroit. That dates back to the 1950s. I understand the safety concerns. I understand that no one wants octopus juice all over them. But I do like those things when they happen organically, and they aren't.
When Dennis Potvin, after Dennis Potvin hit Ulf Nielsen and broke his leg, and obviously they still chant Potvin sucks. They do that at baseball games, football games all the time. But for a while there, early, they were also throwing dead fish at Potvin during the warm-up, and man, it was stinky dead fish too. Oh, you could smell it all over the place. It was pretty good, but it's still amazing too, those traditions like that. But it's still amazing to go to the Garden, and I'll tell somebody who hasn't been to a Ranger game. I said, listen, somebody's going to start whistling here, and then they're all going to yell, "Potvin sucks." And then you have to go into the explanation of what happened. I think most people that go, but I mean, some of the people that do it don't even realize where it came from too. But it's those traditions.
And I do love those. And every building has them. The fact that in Chicago, like, I don't know how this started, but they applaud loudly during the national anthem.
Yeah,
and I like that. And again, that wasn't 7 people.
So Barry the Flyer killed. That was in Buffalo, wasn't it, during the playoff game?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, I think that was Buffalo.
Yeah. So I was to Chicago. I'll tell you, being a visiting team in Chicago when they're playing the national anthem and they get roaring like they used to, man, that was that whole scene in Chicago was good too, because the locker rooms are down below, so you've got to go up the stairs to get to the ice, and the crowd's going nuts back then. It didn't matter who you were or how good or bad the team was doing. That was incredible feeling. It's like you're going into the Coliseum to be slaughtered or something. So it was good.
Yeah, it was like the Coliseum, and it was dangerous too. Like, you had to be careful on those steps.
Yeah,
it was horrible when guys got hurt and they had to be helped. To the locker room. Like, it was treacherous. Trying to get down there, and but during the Gulf War, when they the anthem at the All-Star game, like, that was incredible. I don't think there was a dry eye in the house.
Yeah, that was good.
That was very, very memorable. And I think since then the Chicago fans have gone out of their way to make it as loud as ever every time they do it. And it seems louder in the playoffs. I think it's because every nook and cranny is filled during a playoff game, and everybody's pumped up anyway to. And they brought it with them. Obviously, we were talking about Chicago Stadium is where you notice the most, where the acoustics, of course, were. But you know what? When they got the new arena up, it's still just as loud. So
some of those traditions are fun, aren't they? Like, and you look at the new stuff now, like in Dallas, in Nashville, in Vegas, the stuff they do before games and everything, the country singers. One of the things, you go back to the old buildings, and it's one of the amazing things you really didn't think about when you're a young player coming in. But in Montreal and Toronto, the benches back then were not separated from the fans in any way. Like, the fans could walk right through the bench, actually. And you were sitting on the bench, especially in Montreal, they would always, I think they did it intentionally, they would always put a beautiful woman sitting right beside the bench for the visiting team. And it just seemed that they always did that. But I think about it now with everybody all boxed off and no access to whatever, it was a whole different feel.
Well, I was fortunate enough that I saw all the original 6 buildings. Obviously, I was to the Montreal Forum, and I grew up in Detroit. I saw the Olympia. I saw Maple Leaf Gardens, the Boston Garden. I've seen Madison Square Garden. I've been to, so I've seen them. Had seen them all. And what I've told people, and I put the old Mellon Arena, Civic Arena, in that group too, just because it was such a unique thing. I actually like that building. I think more fondly of that than the Boston Garden, even though that's a historic venue in Boston. The Boston
Spectrum in Philly too. The Spectrum in Philly is in that category too, I think.
For sure. Oh yeah, and the press box was so low there. You were at center ice that it was like you were in a $200 seat when you're at the Spectrum. But what I remember about games in those arenas, and it really speaks to how the game has changed. Like, now, there's so much emphasis put on in-game entertainment and music and loud music. Deafening music. Yeah. So, like, it's hard to carry on that's the one thing I notice when I go to an NFL game and I'm there as a fan and I'm with my son or my wife. Like, you can carry on a conversation between plays. You cannot do that at a hockey game because they've got music that's just so deafening. Well, when I remember when I was a young reporter, or even when I was a a youngster, I remember, because it was only a 5-hour drive, we used to drive from Michigan to Maple Leaf Gardens as in high school and be able to see Maple Leaf game.
That's right.
But it was always so quiet in those arenas that when play was on, because people were so intent, you could hear the players, call for a pass or cuss at one another.
Yep.
And now obviously you never can hear that because there's just so much going on, and the crowd noise and the acoustics and everything is going on. So that's the difference. It was really I've heard people compare it to church. It wasn't like church, but it was.
It was a whole different feel, especially in the Canadian cities. It was like more like you're at the ballet or something. There's a certain respect. Like you're not supposed to be talking during the game, right?
And men were dressed up in suits and fedoras, and at least in the 60s. When you went to a game when I was young in the 60s to Olympia, people would be all dressed up. It was an event. To go, now they go.
What a great feeling, but weird, especially in Toronto. For me, growing up in Toronto, playing my first NHL game there, like it's just like it's incredible, because you've grown up as a kid watching Hockey Night in Canada from Maple Leaf Gardens and all the great players, the Davey Keons and all those kind of guys. And then to be out there on the ice playing, and it was for a little bit, like you really had to kind of say, okay, get your mind in the game because this is the real deal now. So it was fun.
Yeah.
Another old arena is the St. Louis Checker Dome. I
like that arena. Again, I have fond memories of going to, one of my favorite games there was actually a highly competitive, maybe the last competitive All-Star game. The 5-4 All-Star game. I believe Mario got a pair of goals in that, but the guys were into it, and it was a tight game. It was a fun game, entertaining game. Now we just we don't do that. I think what changed that too is the tightness of the Players Association had everything to do with that. I say that because players came together more. They didn't, and I think because people were traded more and all that kind of stuff. But the olden days, you looked at your players on the other teams as the enemy.
Right. Well, I remember when I was still in the agent business and Donald Fair had gotten going. And he came from the baseball world. So he wanted to have, during the playoffs, he wanted to have meetings with the teams. And he wanted the two teams in the playoffs, like in whatever city they were, to go into the meeting together in the middle of a playoff round. And I said to him, and I think he ended up doing it too. I think it was out in Arizona or something. I said to him, Donald, I understand, but these guys want to kill each other. Like, I don't want to be sitting in a meeting. And he just couldn't grasp that. I think it was at that point he said, well, that's just disrespectful. He just didn't get the whole concept of how bad these guys wanted to win that series. So.
Yeah. But for whatever reason, and then the contracts, grew, and then you're really risking a lot playing an All-Star game. So for whatever reason, now we just don't have competitive games to the same.
Do we think the league has done a pretty good job, though, is coming up with some creative stuff, though?
Sure. Yeah, and also people just have to change their thinking on all-star games and also outdoor hockey. Like I grow weary of, and I was one of them, a national columnist, but I saw it differently. National columns will say, the outdoor game has lost its luster. Well, what I like to remind people, hey, maybe I don't want to watch it or we don't want to watch it on TV, but in those cities where the Winter Classic is, that is a major event. Definitely. I've never been to a Winter Classic, and I've been to a lot of them, that wasn't just a huge event in that city. Fans embrace it. There's usually a carnival that goes with it. Local high schools play on that ice. They usually bring in an AHL or a college game.
They usually have an alumni game there as well.
There's so much that goes into those, and they're big events. And I just think it's short-sighted for a columnist to suggest that they've outlived their usefulness. That really shows a lack of understanding of what these events mean in these communities, and they're huge money makers. So there's that as well. The same thing.
It becomes an event, like even traditional hockey fans are still watching them. They want to watch the game now. It's on New Year's Day, and all that.
Yeah, and everybody hopes for snow, bad conditions, or rain, something that will make it, entertaining to watch. They like the elements to be a part of it. Well, what I've said about the All-Star game is, look, it may not be the most competitive thing in the world, but as you said, the league tries hard to make it competitive. But when you rip it as they shouldn't even have it, then you don't understand what it is. It's really the annual convention of the National Hockey League. Totally. You go to a different city every year. It's on the competition they have, the skills contest. It's for the kids. The kids go, they have a good time. When you're there, it's mildly entertaining. There's usually something that's going on, the fastest player, the hardest shot. And, so what? Like, if you don't love it, why do you got to ridicule it?
Remember, like, some of the things happened, like the John Scott All-Star game, where everybody that was turned to be a fantastic thing. The players actually did a great job to make that a fantastic game.
For sure. And again, it wasn't planned. It was organic. Just happened. Nobody planned that John Scott was going to be the hero.
I remember John Scott was funny too, because Jeremy Roenick was one of the guys that was very critical of the fact that he was getting selected to the All-Star game. And to JR's credit, because John Scott was a big man, JR went over to him on the bench and interviewed him. And he said, I don't think he apologized. He said, but I was one of the ones that was wrong. I thought you shouldn't be here. John Scott leaned back to me and says, well, I'm used to you being wrong all the time anyways. And it was hilarious the way he said it. It was pretty funny. And JR took it. He was great. He laughed about it. And that was
fun. No, I mean, those are the kind of things. And I think, sometimes you have to sort of look at it a little bit differently. Like another instance like that is what Vegas does before games.
Yeah.
Not everyone's cup of tea. Right. There are traditionalists who think, I don't want to see skits or, Hollywood-esque style of presentations of, plays on the ice like they do. And so what I say to them is, then don't tune in for all that. Just tune in at 8:08 and watch the start of the game. Like, there are people who do like it. So.
And what works in Vegas may not work in Vancouver or Calgary or something.
And in fact, like, nobody does celebrations or pregame ceremonies like Montreal. They're unbelievable. Now, there's no comparison of what's going on in Vegas and what goes on in Montreal. Like Montreal, there's just such a romance to it, the history of the game. Every time,
and again, I'm going to sound a little bit Ranger prejudiced here, but Madison Square Garden, when they do a celebration, their light show and everything is pretty good too. And it is a different feel, right? Because it's Montreal opposed to
right. But my point is, it's okay to like them all. Yeah. Like, you don't have to like one and hate the rest. You can like Vegas for what they do, or not like it. If you don't like it, so what? Then don't pay attention to it. But not to say, well, that's just horrible and shouldn't be watched. Some people like it. If they didn't like it, Vegas wouldn't be doing it.
And and don't you think we've kind of, for a while there, it was like, well, that's just not the way we do it in hockey mentality. When Carolina guys after the game were doing that at first, and I was one of the guys just like, what? That's weird. But now I look at it, it's pretty funny. The fans are into it. The players are pretty creative with it. So I'm all for it.
Well, and it was hard. Like, it was like they were choreographing a show every time they won. So I give them a lot of credit for that, and the fans loved it. And then, you know what? It outlived its usefulness, and it was gone.
Yeah.
But again, wasn't planned. It wasn't the team trying to force feed this on anybody. This was something they just did on their own. Fans reacted. They just extended it, and then when it ran its course, they abandoned it.
So, have they stopped doing it now? Well, obviously we haven't played so long at home.
Yeah, I think they have. At some point, they didn't do it. So, I don't think they. I think they stopped at the end of the regular season.
Oh, okay. Oh,
so
cool. Good.
One of the things, just the same note, and we acknowledge, of course, Pierre Lacroix's contributions to Colorado, but I saw good news that on Sportsnet I read that Guy Lapointe's son said that he's in remission from cancer, and he was, of course, a scout with Minnesota, but we all remember him for being a defenseman on those great Montreal teams. So that's good news.
definitely. Now, and the really good news too is in one of our Barry Shirley actually noticed on my cooking show yesterday that because of your critical comments about the color of my food, I had to make sure that I made bruschetta, which was very colorful, red and the basil and everything too. So I mentioned it to you, and I realized that you didn't even watch my cooking show yesterday. So
no, I didn't see your cooking show. I'm sorry about that. I was busy. I had a lot going on, but I have been on record as saying it's been brought up about how critical that comment was, and it is the first time in my career when I've been critical, and I really didn't even know I was being critical. so I really must be a good journalist if I can be critical without even knowing.
Wow. And I think, because I hold you in such high esteem, all the Hall of Fames you're in and everything. So when you're critical of me, it just affects me even more.
Yeah. Well, I when I look back on it, I guess so, because color, I watch those cooking contests, and they all talk about, the presentation of the food and stuff. And, sometimes they mark people down for, not putting the peas next to the corn or whatever it is.
I'm like that now. Like I make sure I clean around the plate and everything like that to make sure there's no little messes. It's got to look right. Yeah, that's no question.
Yeah. Well, I saw something on a cooking show, and I thought I have to tell my friend Tom Laidlaw. I don't know. Lamb is considered pretty good meat for you, isn't it? Lamb.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, it was lamb shakes in vegetables, and the vegetables were one of them. You're not fond of was potatoes, sweet potatoes they had, and then they had I think it was rutabagas. It was some other. It was squash. Squash, and then they had some other vegetables mixed in, and then they served that over couscous. And I thought, well, Tom's got to be a couscous person. I
don't know if I've ever had couscous.
Oh, that's big with my wife. She likes.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean it's a something that's better for you than rice. She serves couscous, and it's pretty good.
Yeah.
So
I noticed the other day I was getting my tires changed in my car, and I had to wait for a long time, and it was past my time when the fast was going to end, so I had to eat. And there was McDonald's around, and Wendy's, and all that kind of stuff, and I just couldn't do it. I had to go to a diner and get a turkey burger and sweet potato fries. So.
Oh, all right. That's not bad.
Yeah,
that's not bad. Now, you don't do baked potatoes either because it's just
yeah. Once in a while, I'll make those small potatoes and I'll cut them in half and put them in the air fryer. But that's rarely. I mean, once every 2 months. The rest of the sweet. I've gotten to the point with the sweet potato fries. We make them a lot of different ways. We made the sweet potato waffle, which was a big hit. Oh, love those. And then it's easy to do. Oh,
yeah,
unbelievable.
Yeah. For sure. All right. Well, we appreciate you tuning in to the Laidlaw and Allen Report. This is all things hockey that we discuss and cooking, and the True Grit lifestyle. Don't forget that Tom gets up every morning at 3:30, and I get up about 3 hours later.
All right, guys. We'll see you on Wednesday.